Well, it's no secret the British Columbia Lions are in a little bit of a mid-season slump, but we've seen teams be in one of those before and do great things by the end of November. It is First and Now, Ottawa week. First trip to Ottawa in over 2 years. Matt Baker alongside Nick Kowalski. And, well, a lot has happened in the last few days since we sat in this setting doing this podcast. We were talking about the quick return of Nathan Rourke last week and all the excitement, all the enthusiasm in the market, but still have to play the game to get the result. And ultimately, it was one that was not too memorable for Rourke and the entire BC Lions, losing their fourth in a row, now 5-5, a 2011 loss to the Bombers. Losing sucks. Not going to sugarcoat that. And Nathan Rourke was impressive at the podium post-game. We've hit on that, talking about how he wasn't good enough. And I liked the thing apologizing to the fans, Nick, because he knows that everyone was excited to see him.
Yeah, he definitely shouldered the blame. We ran the post-game. We always run the post-games full, or media full. We never cut stuff out. I like that about
uncensored. Yeah,
I like that about how we operate. Never get instructed. I've never ever been instructed to actually take anything out. I think there was one time, but it was a sponsorship related thing. If you catch my drift, it was about a donut brand.
No donut talk here right now. But yes,
with Nathan's media, he took the time out to apologize, and I don't think there should be any excuses. Nathan didn't have any excuses for that. Obviously, Winnipeg was a better team on Sunday and came out to play and had a better game plan and all that stuff, but it's not the standard we're used to seeing Nathan Rourke. And yeah, there are excuses, there are reasons probably for Nathan not meeting that standard we're used to, but it's good on Nathan for shouldering the blame as a leader, as a quarterback, right? He said it in that apology that as a quarterback, you touch the ball every single play on offense. So while it is a team game, the quarterback is probably the most important position in all of sports. I sat in this very chair last week saying I was surprised to see Nathan Rourke in the building last week, and I think I was even more surprised to see that result on Sunday.
Yeah, you have to credit the other team. This Winnipeg Blue Bombers team has been playing elite defense, championship defense. Lions were shut out there 2 weeks ago. Before that, Winnipeg went into Toronto and lost a game in overtime, but did not allow any offensive majors. It was a pick-six touchdown for Toronto, the Argos' only touchdown in a game that both offenses struggled. So a lot of the usual suspects there. Willie Jefferson causing havoc. You saw Dietrich Nichols with an intercepted ball. Adam Bighill still very much a factor in the middle of that defense. So yeah, that's the harsh reality is this Lions team now going to have to finish with more points than the Blue Bombers to stay ahead in the standings. Just a 2-point lead on Winnipeg right now, a point behind Saskatchewan for top spot in the West Division. But you could tell the Bombers were like sharks in the water and blood circling around, so to speak, to use an analogy. They knew all the hype. They would have loved nothing more than to come and spoil the party, and they did just that. They're a well-coached team as well. Mike O'Shea getting his 100th win with the Bombers, too, adding insult to injury, so to speak, in the Lions venue. But there were some bright spots to hit on. You've seen guys like Ryder Varga, Ace Ely move into starting roles on the defense. Sione Tuhema, probably one of the Lions' top defensive players. TJ Lee, his first interception since coming back from injury last year. And that was it, too. A couple of big turnovers in the second half. The Lions' offense can't build off that momentum. That game was there for the taking, and they just could not do it.
Yeah, and I brought this up on Tap yesterday, but in case we don't have any listeners of both shows, first off, you should be listening to On Tap. But secondly, another point I brought up is Coach Campbell talking in postgame that when your offense is kind of in this funk and they're not putting up points and not kind of matching what Winnipeg's doing and on that same level that Zach Collaros and that offense is operating at, there's really no margin for error on defense. And I think we saw that too. So the defense, they got those 2 turnovers like you mentioned, so that's all you can pretty much ask for from a defense on a game-by-game basis. But they're on Winnipeg's 2 touchdown drives of the game. There was a 2nd and 16, and Zach Collaros hit Nick Dembski in that patented corner ball in the end zone. And then the second touchdown drive in the third quarter, Winnipeg was in 2nd and 10 situation on their own side of the field, and it's a 37-yard pass from Zach Collaros to who else but Nick Dembski on a corner route too. So those 2 mistakes that led to 2 touchdowns and a 9-point loss. That was the difference. It's as simple as that in my opinion. And I thought for Nathan Rourke in the offense, they were functionable and productive in the first quarter, maybe first 10-20 minutes of the game, but then kind of fell off the rails toward the second half and couldn't get anything going. There was a McInnes ball in the end zone, the Hatcher ball in the end zone that would have been outstanding catches, but Hatcher obviously didn't hang on, and McInnes' foot's just out of bounds. It just felt
great
like it was
play out of bounds.
One of those days, right? Unfortunately, but like you said, bright spots. I thought Jordan Perryman, Terrence Gagne on special teams did a good job. It was Lucky Whitehead's return to BC Place. He was in a returning role, held to under 10 yards.
And a running back role. Couple jet sweeps there for.
There was an interesting one where they like to do like the little pop pass jet sweep play, and there was one that was a forward handoff. If you catch my drift, I think there might be an error on that play, but it was called a pass. I was looking at the footage back, and I'm like, oh, that ball never left Zach's hands, but is what it is, and we'll move forward.
Yeah, it's Ottawa week. Lions and Red Blacks, 6-2-1. Ottawa, one of the probably the most improved CFL team so far this season. And
definitely, yeah.
We're going to see Dominique Rhymes for the first time. It is a home-and-home series, technically. Touchdown Pacific next week, Victoria. Stay tuned for a full schedule of the festival. We'll talk about Victoria on next week's episode. Absolutely. We'll dedicate it to our provincial capital. But yeah, Dominique Rhymes, just one good story on this Red Blacks team. They've got a good group of receivers. Jalen Acklin, part of that as well. The Armstead out of the backfield. He's another one of these bruisers who likes to run downhill. And I know they've had some injuries there that have caused him to get a bit of an opportunity in the backfield. And but back to Drew Brown for a second. There's a Winnipeg tie-in here. The Lions beat Drew Brown in October 15th, 2022. Remember, the Bombers had already clinched first place. They rested Zach Collaros. They rested a couple other guys, and the Lions won a game. I think that game was known for special teams. Couple big returns in that game.
Two
right?
pick sixes.
Two pick sixes. It
TJ
was.
Lee,
yes.
Marcus Sales. Yeah.
And then Terry Williams might have done some damage that night. If
Yeah, that was the day he had like 343. I might have nailed that. Yards returning.
Yeah, it was huge. So, yeah, Drew Brown. That's a guy. He was kind of the latest example of a solid backup who was going to get paid to be a starter somewhere else. He appears to be back after 1 week out of injury. Good for Jeremiah Masoli coming in and willing the Red Blacks to a win in Calgary. But this will be a nice little test.
Yeah, definitely. The offense is, like you said, they got Armstead running back. He's kind of like that energetic power back, kind of like a William Stanback kind of vibe to him. And he's been, we're talking to AJ about this, or AJ Jakubec, our guest after about this, but Armstead's been he's been no stranger to the chirping post whistle and all that too. Yeah. So he was someone that was on full display last week. If you watched their game against Calgary, he almost had this little Solomon Elimimian moment at his halftime interview with Farhan Lalji, where he was barking at some Stampeders defenders crossing into their locker room at halftime. But yeah, Justin Hardy's another guy at receiver. I think maybe he might be the most underrated receiver in the CFL. He was a 1,000-yard guy last year. He has 690 yards already this season, so he's well over on pace for 1,000 again. It's number 2 on Ottawa. For those who don't know, he's someone that kind of been like their safety blanket, right? I know Dominique Grimes is kind of the big play guy. Jalen Acklin has some of the best hands in the CFL too, right? And I mean, I guess it's a good news for us, but a bad case for them. But they had this guy Khalil Pimpleton as a returner, speedster kind of gadget guy that was breaking out like crazy, making highlight reel plays, but he's injured right now, so they've lost him. But I think their first round pick is in the starting receiving core, Nick Mardner. So yeah, a lot of weapons for Ottawa. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they're diverse, and they have Tommy Condell calling plays, offensive coordinator. That's a guy who got a lot of results when he was with Hamilton. And yeah, AJ Jakubec will join us, longtime voice of the Ottawa REDBLACKS on TSN 1200, and we'll talk about this with him, but a minute or so right now. It's kind of cool that we're going to be there for the all-decade celebration. A good tie-in, obviously. I think this was done with the intention of having Coach Rick there. So Rick Campbell, of course, the inaugural head coach of the REDBLACKS, his first head coaching job, a Grey Cup champion there in 2016, and 3 Grey Cup appearances in 4 years. And it's funny, I talked to Rick about this. He said, you know what's funny? 3 trips to the Grey Cup in 4 years. The year in there we didn't make it was when we were hosting it. And I know they were jacked up to host that Grey Cup a year after they had won it ultimately. But Rick Campbell, of course, in his 4th season, and he keeps climbing the win charts for BC. It'll be cool to see him back there for that.
Yeah, and a lot of parallels too with that Grey Cup winning team in 2016, right? He talked about the quarterback situation. And I'm talking to the Lions right now, because you look at the Trevor Harris and Henry Burris situation. They were flip-flopping quarterbacks all season, two more than capable quarterbacks under their belt, right? And they go into they had an 8-9-1 record and ultimately won the Grey Cup. And I know if however the rest of our season transpires, if say we go 8-9-1, I'll trade that all for a Grey Cup at the end of the day, right? So it doesn't matter how you get there, it just matters how you do it, right? Or how you finish. So
right. Well, we're about to induct the 2000 champions to the Wall of Fame September 13th, and that was the first team to go sub 500 and win it all at 8-10.
Yeah, and so it's gonna be an interesting game though. I'm calling this the Pickett Bowl for those who don't. For the Touchdown Pacific has a nice ring to it, but I'm going with the Pickett Bowl because there's our Darius Pickett, one of the best defenders in the CFL, a linebacker for the Red Blacks. But we got our own Pickett too, Riley Pickett, the versatile special teams demon, fullback, whatever you want to call him. He's long snapper, special teams tackles. He kind of does it all too, right? So we got the Battle of the Pickets these next 2 weeks, home and home, but. Yeah, we'll start marketing that. That'll sell, right?
Well,
more than Touchdown Pacific.
Well, maybe when Ottawa comes next year to BC Place,
the Pickett Bowl.
Yeah. Get some dual press conferences going, and
I'll do like a little UFC style scrum.
Yeah, let's go.
Riley Pickett would be jacked up for that. He's an intense guy.
He is. See him in the weight room. He's very dedicated to his regimen.
Good Sasky boy, as they would say.
Good Sasky boy is right. We got a few of them. All right, we'll talk more all decade, and more importantly, on this improved Red Black squad, AJ Jakubec, radio voice of the Rouge et Noir on TSN 1200, coming up. And we now head to the nation's capital, a longtime friend of ours, TSN 1200. Were you the inaugural voice of the Red Blacks back in 14, AJ? I think I should know the answer, but...
Yeah, I was there for 7-5. That's how you know if you're the inaugural voice of the Red Blacks.
Travis Lulay injury.
Oh yeah, well that was part of that as well. I mean, that was just that first year was crazy because they lost 7-5 at home to BC. They lost 10-8 at home to Edmonton, but they had all these close games. And it's interesting, like last year, like 19 and 21. The Red Blacks weren't very competitive. And then last year, it's another 4-win season. Like the team won 14 games in the last 4 seasons. But last year they had all these heartbreakers. The game in BC is a prime example where they blew an 18-point lead in the 4th quarter and found a way to lose. And those are the games this year that they're finding ways to win. I mean, they've got Lewis Ward, for as great as he's been, prior to this year, had never had a walk-off game-winning field goal. He's got 3 this year.
Wow.
That's pretty good indication of just, it's 1 or 2 plays a game that have turned this year where, last year they were just losing those plays.
Well, I want to get into the all-decade talk toward the end of this, but I was actually at that game 10 years ago at Winnipeg, which I believe was their first ever game, right? And I think they went off, I can't remember many of the names that are on that team. I remember it was some random receivers that didn't stick, but I think it was like 14-0 Red Blacks right off the bat, and we're like, whoa, what's going on here? But it's crazy.
They scored on the first 3 drives, and you're thinking, wow, this team's going to the Grey Cup. And then reality set in. They lost that opening game 36-28 in Winnipeg. And then, lost week 2, came back at home, won their home opener in their return 18-17 over Toronto. Brett Maher, who moved on to the NFL, kicked 6 field goals that game. And they only won 1 more game that year. They blew out Winnipeg in a game where Jonathan Williams went off. He still has the single game rushing record, around 200 yards. For Ottawa in a Red Blacks game, and then blew out his knee the next game, and we've never heard from him again. So that was 2014. There's a lot of, it's cool to see the all decade team, and there's a lot of guys that were a part of that team, but there's, you mentioned the receivers. I mean, they signed 5 receivers in the offseason. It was Greg Ellingson, Brad Sinopoli, Ernest Jackson, who was so good in BC before he came here, Chris Williams. So all 4 of those guys had 1,000-yard seasons the next 2 years. And then the 5th guy was Mo Price. And I actually looked this up today. If you would have asked me before I looked this up, I would have said Mo Price probably had 300 yards receiving that year. He had over 600 yards receiving as the number 5 guy coming over in a trade from Calgary. So that and Sir Vincent Rogers, because the defense was already, the core of that defense was already in place, hence the 10-8 and 7-5 games. They just needed some help offensively. And with those 5 guys, I mean, Jeremiah Johnson was a big part of that team as well before he got hurt. And then William Powell took over at running back. It was just a completely different offense. And maybe even more important than the receivers and Sir Vincent Rogers and the running backs and Henry Burris was Jason Moss, who came over. He was here 1 year, but the impact that he had as offensive coordinator was massive that year. And everything just clicked. I mean, I'm more fond of that team. I get it. If you've won a ring and you're one of those guys, like you're probably going to think of 2016. But for me, as someone that's been here for 10 years, I'm actually more fond of the 2015 team, because that ended the drought of really 30 plus years of bad football. And that team won 12 games, which is still in Ottawa. It's tied for an Ottawa Pro Football record. They had that dramatic win over Hamilton to get to the Grey Cup. They're
second and 25, right?
Yeah. Second and 25. Burris to Ellingson against Hamilton. I mean, that's a game that, and he talked to Ottawa football fans. That was a game that for 30 years they lost. They just found ways to lose, kind of like what we're talking about off the top. And they found a way to win that game. And then, the next year was a few more ups and downs, but, essentially everything was the foundation of 2016, and the Grey Cup team was built, partially in 2014, but certainly in 2015 when they won those 12 games and found a way to get to the Grey Cup before losing a close one to Edmonton.
So we might as well finish off with the all-decade talk before we delve into the meat and potatoes of this week. What should we? I mean, it's cool that they're doing it because Coach Rick is coming back. I'm sure that was part of the plan, right? What do you expect? What are we going to see? Some of these legends coming back for the night?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think of the 30 players listed, 10 are still playing in the league, 6 are still in Ottawa. And so 20 of the guys are retired. And I think over half of those guys are coming back. Some it's difficult. Like, I'm not sure Jovan Johnson and Damaso Munoz can make it, even though they're trying, but they're both coaching college football. And just the timing is very difficult to get in and out, with that around the corner as well. But yeah, you're going to see a lot of different players coming back, which is great. We talked to Ernest Jackson today, and he's one of the guys coming back. Jovan Johnson's coming back. There's a lot of guys, which is great. But a cool thing about Rick Campbell, I mean, he was here for, the first 6 seasons, and he coached every guy on this list except for one, and that's Lorenzo Malden. That's the only player that he didn't coach of the 30. There's guys that have been better, in the last few years, like a guy like Devontae Dedmon, for example. He coached him in 2019, and he's kind of moved to the forefront in recent years, but it's still a guy that he coached in Rick's last year here. So I think it's awesome that, he is going to be back for this, which is great. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely skewed. I mean, when I was looking at the list, because I had a vote on this, my biggest concern was that some of the guys from those earlier teams were going to be forgotten, but I was glad that Jovan Johnson and Brandon Thompson and Jarrell Gavins and some of the guys that were there the first 2 to 3 years didn't get forgotten about. One guy I thought probably should, like, I voted for Justin Capicotti, and he's a guy that was only here 2 years. Like, I had Malden and Capicotti as my DNs. Avery Ellis beat him out, and Avery was worthy as well. But Capicotti had the Red Black sack record up until Malden broke it a couple of years ago. So that was one guy that I voted on. But for the most part, I think people did a pretty good job of recognizing, because a lot of times you're just thinking of the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years. But for this team, their best years were 15 and 16, and then 18 would have been their third best year. So you're talking about the first 3 years of this franchise, and there's a lot of guys that have been gone for a long time. So I think they've done a pretty good job with it. And yeah, excited to see some of those faces and names come back on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm excited to be there too. Football in the nation's capital, despite the fact that there's been periods without teams there. Very important. Love those fans, and I know Rick Campbell still speaks glowingly of his experience too. All right, two teams pretty much headed in opposite directions here. We're singing a different tune out here the last 4 weeks, but a lot of football to play. Drew Brown, the news of the week there, probably back practicing. Was there ever a debate to maybe stick with Mazzoli? Or do you think all along the plan was to have Drew back in there once healthy, assuming that's the path they go down here?
Yeah, as when Brown went down, my sense was always that it was only going to be 1 week. So I guess the only doubt that I had was, okay, if he's not 100%, if he's at 85%, do you maybe go with Jeremiah one more week? Because I don't think we've seen much of a drop off. And in the end, Drew's ready to go. And Drew was brought in to be the guy. And he's been very successful, especially in recent weeks. I mean, prior to getting hurt, he had thrown for an average of 365 yards a game in his last 3 starts. And those were all wins. So he's the guy. He's the guy for now. He's the guy for the future. Jeremiah Masoli was brought back on a lesser contract to be the backup. He's the highest paid. Well, maybe he was the highest paid backup in the league before BC's situation.
It's a week by week salary cap situation here. Yes.
Yeah. So, but that's a good place to be.
Yeah.
That let's go back to 2016 again. And, the best quarterback situation that Ottawa's ever had was Henry Burris and Trevor Harris. And, I'm going to ask Coach Campbell about this last night. It's a nice problem to have, but, there were probably some headaches in there as well for Rick, in the sense that, okay, Henry Burris started the year healthy. Then he got hurt. Then Trevor Harris got hurt. Then Hank came back too early. Then he got pulled. And he was pissed. Now, it was the right decision. I remember, the Red Blacks, we had a quarterback club this week, and essentially where 3 players and some staff come in and you host a radio show and ask them questions, and the audience gets to ask questions and take pictures and get autographs after. And I'll never forget Henry Burris, the week that he was relegated to backup quarterback that year in 2016. There was a quarterback club at the mess hall, and hey, Hank, he was not shirking his duties. He came, and I remember seeing his finger, and it was pointing a direction that it shouldn't have been pointing. So you realized, okay, he shouldn't have been playing, but he was still a guy that had pride and wasn't happy about being moved to the backup. And then later that year, Hank got healthier. Trevor Harris went through some struggles. Hank took over. Trevor Harris was pissed. So, there was some drama that year. Now, that team, the record tells you 8-9-1. Now, I believe if that 18th game would have meant something, because they'd already clinched first, they win the last game of the year against Winnipeg. They probably finished 9-8-1. And then they don't have to hear all these people say, well, geez, Ottawa won a Grey Cup at 8-9-1. Well, it is what it is. They probably would have gone 9-8-1, but so be it. But the talent on that team was better than 8-9-1 or 9-8-1 or whatever it would have been. They just dealt with a lot more adversity. And then once they got into the playoffs, they were a very difficult team to beat. So let's fast forward to, this BC Lions team. Look, 4 games in a row they've lost, but I still know what this BC team looks like when they play their best football. it's a pretty damn good football team. So I'm expecting better this week. I'm certainly expecting better from Nathan Rourke. I'm sure his head was spinning in 18 different directions, going from New England to the Giants to Atlanta and coming back to the CFL. And like, I know he's going to be better. It's just, whether it's better this week or better down the stretch. I mean, I saw what he did 2 years ago and 25 touchdowns in half a season. I mean, he's must-watch TV. I'm excited that he's back in the league. And I'm excited to see him this week. I'm glad that he's playing. But, BC's going to be in a similar spot to Ottawa, to Montreal, where they've got two capable quarterbacks. And it's not ideal if at that period in time you're number two. But at the end of the day, all three of these teams are going to be in the mix to win it all because they have this depth. And I think it's great for the league, especially after a couple of years ago, we were talking about a situation where there are enough quarterbacks to go around in the league. And now it feels like the league's in a real good spot. And certainly both of these two teams coming in a good spot. I mean, Masoli, I had no idea what to expect. You're talking about a guy who threw 10 passes in 2 years. But for him to play the way he did, and I think physically just to look the way he did, he looked better than he did last year when he came in against Hamilton. Like just scrambling, he looked better. And his passes, look like the old Jeremiah Masoli. So there's no controversy here, but there's a clear number one, there's a clear number two, but Ottawa knows if they need somebody to finish a game, if they need somebody to start a game, they've got someone that's very capable of winning football games in this league in Jeremiah Masoli. And I think they feel like they're in a pretty good spot no matter what going into the second half of the season.
And AJ, what about the right-hand man to the quarterback this season, Raquel Armstead at running back? Like, how much fun has he been? Because I know entering the season for Ottawa, Devontae Williams was going to be the guy. Then he goes down with that ACL injury. And even I'm watching last week, I think he had over 100 yards, Armstead, before halftime last week. And he's jawing with all the Calgary Stampeders defenders. He's kind of been a pleasant surprise, right? Or did you kind of expect that from camp?
Yeah, I think they were always high on him. Well, it's interesting. Kylan Hill, who was here as well, he was the other player battling with Armstead for the number one job at camp. And, he got antsy and didn't want to be on the practice roster and ended up leaving. And I thought he looked pretty good last week playing for the Calgary Stampeders. So, but I think Ottawa made the right choice. I mean, that's something that Armstead and he knows this and the team knows this. Like, teams are going to try and get him off his game because he'd already been thrown out of a game earlier this year for 2 misconduct penalties. So I think other teams are trying to get him rattled. But, hopefully use that as a learning experience. They've got other players that can come in, Devontae Dedmon, Braylon Addison, that can finish a game, but it's not ideal. You want to have your starting running back be able to go the entire distance. But he's a guy that runs with power. He's got a pretty good burst of speed as well. So, yeah, I mean, they haven't really skipped a beat at the running back position, after Devontae Williams went down. And that was one of those areas where you kind of knew what you were getting with Devontae Williams. You weren't really sure, about a lot of the other pieces on offense. And running back was one of the big question marks for me coming into the season. I would have said running back and probably in the secondary were probably the two biggest concerns that I had. And neither has been a concern at all. So, this is a pretty good and deep team all across the board. And I think Sean Burke and his staff deserve a lot of credit for the type of not just talent, but the depth that they've built at all positions on this football team.
How about on the other side of the ball there too on defense? I know maybe on the West Coast, some of our fans may not know these names like Ardarius Pickett, Lorenzo Baldwin's been doing this thing for a while, but a guy like Bryce Carter has been playing really well last year too, and this year. Like, there's a lot of kind of star power on this defense, and maybe it's under the radar, and maybe the MO of this team too. I think of guys like Justin Hardy that are maybe over here not so well known, but you being so close to them, you see how good these guys are and why this team is 6-2-1, right?
Well, and that's the thing. Like, one of the things, and special teams has been a constant.
Yeah.
When you look at this, like, since Bob Dice took over, like, the special teams weren't very good the first couple of years. when Rick Campbell was here, and of course that was a big part of, what he had done coaching prior to that. And one of the best moves that he ever made was bringing in Bob Dice, who is still here, and he still runs the special teams. And even like when the offense was no good in recent years, when the defense was no good in recent years, the one thing you could count on was special teams. And it's still right up there amongst the best in the league with, ex-BC Lion, Richie Leone at punter, and of course, Lewis Ward at kicker. I mean, it's cool to see Ward go against Paredes, by the way, last week, and now he's going up against Sean White, chasing his record for most consecutive field goals. And so, you got the three most accurate kickers in CFL history, and, it's cool when you get to see them go head to head like that. So looking forward to that matchup as well. But special teams has always been kind of good here in recent years, but there'd always been something. And sometimes it was both the offense and the defense. And to see the defense perform the way that they had, like last year, they were giving up big plays left, right, and center. And the secondary at times they're in shambles. And, this year, with that being the biggest question mark on defense, and then they started the year with Elijah McGee and Brandon Dandridge, their two starting corners, both injured. You thought, well, this is going to be interesting to watch. And they kind of held their own. And then they had a couple of games in there where they kept Calgary off the board. They just about kept Saskatchewan off the board without a touchdown till that wild finish. And yeah, it's a group that I think is pretty complete. Like last year, they had a good front, and that's been constant. Mike Wakefield's an absolute beast in the interior. Pair him with Cleon Lang, who's been a ratio breaker, going back to his Argo days, and certainly played a big part in the 2016 Grey Cup here. Lorenzo Malden saw a lot more double teams last year. Well, that allowed Bryce Carter to have the type of season that he did. And so it's kind of pick your poison with that front. I really think the addition of Darius Pickett to help out guys like Frankie Griffin and Jovan Santos Knox and the linebacking core has been fantastic. The energy that he provides. I mean, he leads the team in special team tackles as well. This is a guy that demands to be on special teams.
He's kick returning.
And and that in an ideal world, he's probably not doing that, but he can. But just what he brings on cover teams. And this is a guy who was Defensive Player of the Year in the East last year. So to have that is huge. And then in terms of the secondary, it wasn't the best game last week. They got burnt a couple of times deep and probably to be expected the first game back for Brandon Dandridge. But, Damon Webb's been solid. DeAndre Lamont's been solid. You've got Alonzo Adai at safety, and then the two corners, I think, are going to have a real good second half now that they're fully healthy and back playing. So, look, they're going to have their hands full this week against BC, no doubt about it. But this is a really strong Ottawa defense, the best we've seen in some time. And I think Baron Miles deserves a lot of credit as well as someone that, there were some people questioning, okay, Kari Jones, they didn't bring him back as offensive coordinator. Why didn't they replace the defensive coordinator? And I think, he's got a real good relationship going back to their Montreal days with Darius Pickett. And I know, like, Pickett told us early in the season, like, he would go to him. He wanted them to be more aggressive on defense. And to have, in 1984, the defensive coordinator's not listening to your best defensive player. Yeah. But to have that, it's different time now. And, Baron Miles certainly listened to what Pickett had to say. And this team plays a little bit more aggressively. And I think the results speak for themselves. So, to not have that ego to say, no, it's my way or the highway, to listen to your players and know that, okay, sometimes maybe I need to be flexible, and it's paid off. I think has certainly proved really important for this Red Blacks team this year.
Very nice breakdown as always, and we're going to be seeing you for 2 weeks here, my friend.
Oh yeah.
There's going to be a watch out for some media releases here from yours truly. There's a couple social gatherings in Victoria next week that we're going to expect to see you. Okay,
I'm in.
First pints on me. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. Can't wait, Victoria. The only bad thing about going to Victoria is it means no trip to Vancouver, but
yeah. Well, hey,
November.
Don't count your chickens yet, but you never know. Yeah.
I'd hope you want to come to Vancouver. Yeah.
Look, the East, say what you want. Like, the East is kind of the whipping boy. And by the way, I have been very, very good. I'm not as combative as I used to, but I could have been basically saying one division, CFL one division to all the Western people. But no, I grew up in the West in a time where the West was dominant and you knew it was going to be tougher to get out and you didn't complain about it. All these new Western people from the prairies mainly complaining about, it should be one division. Our team has a tougher road. And no, that's the way it goes.
You got to beat the good teams eventually, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't see me complaining about the fact that, the two best teams in the CFL happen to be in the East at the same time. So be it. Have to go through Montreal to get to a Grey Cup. So be it. And Toronto for that matter, because I think Toronto's going to be pretty good in the second half of the season as well. We'll see how it goes, but it's all cyclical. And can't wait. Looking forward to what should be a great second half of the season. That trip to Victoria is going to be awesome. And, one way or the other, I'd love to get to Grey Cup. Ideally, it would be covering the Ottawa REDBLACKS, but should be a great event. I was there 10 years ago in Vancouver, and they hosted a great event and ended up being a great game. Unfortunately, for Hamilton, the block in the back prevented a Grey Cup victory in dramatic fashion. But should be a fantastic event. Love what the Lions are doing in BC these days with Amar Dolman leading the charge, and it should be a great event no matter what.
Well said. We'll see you in the nation's capital first here in a couple days, AJ, and always appreciate the time, my friend.
Anytime, guys. Take care. Look forward to seeing you guys.
Awesome. Thanks, AJ. See you Saturday.
One of our all-time favorites, AJ Jakubec, and he started talking about the 2014 Grey Cup here in Vancouver. That's when I first met him, I think. We were out at Spirit of Edmonton at the Wall Center, ironically, where Sakaris and Price do their podcast. This year, I think it's all the same place. But
I heard that, yeah.
Spirit of Edmonton often goes off on its own, and they were at the Wall Center for some reason, and that was a good time.
I don't know if this is like a hot take. It probably is, but I would prefer if all 9 were just together.
Yeah.
Or all 10, because there's the schooners.
Easy access. And Hamilton in 2021 and maybe last year, Spirit was at a pizza place. It was kind of random. And in Regina, they were at where the awards were they not? I think so.
Even last year, I remember Liam had to Uber to it because you couldn't even walk to it. It was November. It was
like up the hill somewhere. It was at some.
Yeah. Whereas the other areas, you're in a convention center, you just buy a ticket to get in, you go to all the parties, you can hop around. It's great. I like that aspect of it.
I hope we're working.
Yeah, I don't want to be there.
I don't want to.
For the record.
Maybe go in there for a drink on Saturday night before going to bed at 10 before the big game.
No, if we're in a Grey Cup Sunday, I'm locked in all week. There's no way.
Yes.
We're off the sauce, as they would say.
Yes. Have a Coors Light non-alcoholic if they make one. So, all right, week 12 moving along. Week 12 in the CFL. Riders at Argos Thursday night. We have a keen eye on this one because Saskatchewan, again, 1 point ahead of the Lions for top spot in the Western Division. Chad Kelly, speaking of quarterbacks returning, 9-game suspension is over. All this talk about rust and everything with Nathan Rourke, and given everything that Chad has been going on with him, you wonder where his head is at, but we'll just talk about it from a football perspective. 2 pretty good teams, and I think this is Saskatchewan's first trip to Toronto since 2019. Because they've done Touchdown Atlantic the last 2 years.
You're right, yeah.
Did not go there in 2021 as per the unbalanced schedule, so that's another cool little nugget.
That's how much of a weird football CFL nerd I am. That just got me excited. But
yeah,
the fact that you said that it sounds right. Whenever I think of Saskatchewan going to Toronto, I think of that East Final they played in where Ricky Gray hit James Wilder for a game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, we were that close to a crossover Grey Cup.
Yeah.
Was it a Christian Jones kickoff return for Saskatchewan that put them up right before that?
Man, that
I
sounds
think
right.
it was.
That sounds right.
And then
it was like peak Deron Carter too.
Then Ricky Ray led them down the field. There was a big third down that Toronto had to get on that drive.
That's right. I think
Otherwise,
he
it was
hit Wilder.
over.
Yeah,
That was Wilder.
I think Fajardo might have.
Fajardo scored the winning touchdown.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's
And
what I always
then-
think about these two teams.
Can you imagine if it would have been a Saskatchewan-Calgary Grey Cup that year in Ottawa?
And Deron Carter
Yeah.
and Bo Levi. Those are the glory days. I always tell people about that when Deron Carter, probably would have been a nightmare for if he was on our team and doing that. But remember when he was tweeting at Bo Levi and they're going and then Deron Carter gets a pick six off him. It was just crazy times in the CFL. But it's funny. We were talking post game on Sunday. I was with Tyler Gammon, our football operations manager, and he was joking about that this past Sunday in the CFL could have been like the June 17th, 1994 30 for 30 documentary, because you got the reinstatement of Chad Kelly, Nathan Rourke's return, Chris Jones is hired back in Hamilton, all in a span of 24 hours. So obviously the trickle down of all these news stories are continuing this week, and it starts, like you said, with Toronto and Chad Kelly starting his first game of the season. So all eyes on that one. It's going to be a dandy, as they say.
Good 30 for 30, by the way. Have you watched it?
I have.
Yeah. Very good stuff. Even if it shows footage of the Canucks losing to the Rangers, but
Yeah, you brought it up.
very well done. All right, Friday night. Speaking of Chris Jones, Friday night, he is in Winnipeg, the Tiger Cats at the Blue Bombers. Hamilton, they pretty much need to run the table to stay in this, don't they? Looking how those top three in the East are going. I'm guessing Bo Levi Mitchell's the guy again, right?
Yeah, sorry, not sorry.
And then Winnipeg, we've talked about them a bit to start this episode off. Don't see any reasons to have them slow down against the Tiger Cats, but again, that's why they play the game. So maybe have to park ourselves somewhere in Ottawa Friday night and watch this one.
Yeah, and I think first off to mention too for Hamilton the status of receiver Luther Hakanavanu and quarterback Taylor Powell, two very scary injuries, especially Hakanavanu on the first play of the game, and I'm watching that live and it's like, oh no, he's not moving, and immediately the ambulance is out and you're thinking bad thoughts, but it seems like everything's going to be okay with Luther, so that's great news. But yeah, like Hamilton, they got to get it going, right? I know they switched up running backs last week. Greg Bell actually played really well for them at running back, I thought, but interesting to see James Butler out of the lineup for the Ticats. And I mean, we can relate, but IG Field has kind of been a house of nightmares for the Ticats of late. I don't think they've had much success at all there lately. I remember last year, I think they were in a massive hole in Bo Levi's debut with Hamilton to start that game in Winnipeg. So best of luck, Hamilton. But let's do us a favor maybe, hey?
Yeah, you never know. Maybe Chris Jones lights a fire for them. We shall see.
Crazier things have happened.
All right, we're talking about the all-decade celebrations in Ottawa. How cool is this? Montreal celebrating 50-year anniversary of the 74 Grey Cup.
Fire.
Wally Buono is going to be there.
Really?
Yeah. Wally was out at practice a couple days last week. And he says, we're going to Montreal for this celebration. And again, the tie-in there, we're talking about Coach Rick being there for Ottawa. Edmonton would have been Montreal's opponent, I think, in that Grey Cup. So maybe this was sort of by design too. And then Montreal's wearing a pretty slick third jersey.
That's why I was saying fire.
Yes. Hey, I'll tell you what, Edmonton's hot right now, though. Montreal, the clear number one team in this league, but a couple of the Montreal's wins have come down to the wire, twice against Saskatchewan. And, tough test for the Elks to try to go for 4 in a row here, though.
Yeah, and Cody Fajardo, I think, has been confirmed as a starting quarterback for Montreal.
I saw that,
so,
yes.
I mean, Davis Alexander, as technically a third stringer, did quite a job. The dramatics last Friday at Moja's birthday party were off the chain when Davis is tiptoeing into the end zone to defeat the Saskatchewan Roughriders. And people were, it was funny, people were calling that because there's that one angle where it looks like he's in, there's that one angle where it looks like he's completely out. So people were calling it.
You can't overturn that call when it's that close. Yeah.
I'm pouring it out for the command center. They've had a tough year of from the social media aspect of things. People calling for their heads, but I think they're doing a great job personally, for the record. But people were calling that play the CFL's version of like the gold dress and the blue dress, because one angle, it looks like he's out. One angle, it looks like he's in. So it's interesting. But it looks like McLeod Thompson's still going to be the guy for Edmonton. So if Edmonton can go on the road and knock off the 9-1 Montreal Alouettes, I mean, you got to start calling this Edmonton team for real, right? I know in this building, we know there's parity and anybody can win on any given day, but there's a difference between being a team that can win and a team that is for real, right? And if Edmonton can do this, I'll call them for real.
Yeah. Again, 3 straight walk-off losses there at one point, and G-Roy and Jarius clearly sending the right messages to the players still in that room. So that'll be a nice little Sunday
this whole
to
week,
watch that one. Yeah, four
stud
great games.
Yeah.
And by the way, I just thought of another idea for a documentary. Bob Marjanovic at 60. The Life of Moj.
Well, I think that's the next on tap trivia thing we were joking about. I did the Life of Will Stanback, and now we're going to go the Life of Moj. Yeah,
I got shut out on trivia. That's a first. I'm not always good at those prices right.
Will was
things.
so good at it though. If you haven't listened, go listen to On Tap.
Yeah,
you weren't bad. Will was just really good. It was one of the. It wasn't. You didn't lose.
Yeah.
Will just won.
Couple close
that's
ones.
That's how we'll phrase that. So, but wrap it up with go for it or punt.
Okay,
here.
yeah, go for it. Yeah.
You want me to start off
yes.
here?
Yeah.
All right, I listed 2 options here, but I think I gotta go with my first one. So I'm watching Hard Knocks. We talked about Theo Bennett in episode 1. Episode 3 came out yesterday. Hard Knocks been great as always, loving it. But so pretty much my favorite podcast for the last almost decade has been a podcast called Part of My Take. And essentially, for those who don't know what it is, it's a podcast based pretty much entirely on satire. And it's a Bears fan and a Commanders fan, and they live a life of misery because they're franchises. And it's funny, they've had Aaron Rodgers on their show, but they always joke about Aaron Rodgers being like the devil essentially.
Owns Chicago, or has owned Chicago.
But I'm tuning into Hard Knocks last night, and out of nowhere, there's a segment where these podcast microphones get sat down. Caleb Williams, the Bears franchise rookie quarterback, comes in, and none other than Part of My Take are sitting down to interview them live on the show, or not live on the show, but they got their own like 2-minute segment where they're just doing a podcast with Caleb, and the Hard Knocks edited it to be like a montage with Caleb kind of dealing with all the media and making big plays and all that. But Part of My Take, it's a podcast that consistently makes me laugh out loud, and it was really cool to see them on Hard Knocks. So I'm going for both things, and I think you should check out both things if you have the time.
Yeah, that is cool. I like that.
Maybe one day we'll be on it.
Yeah,
for now.
Well, when the CFL launches its own Hard Knocks, we'll be
Nathan Rourke sitting down in front of us.
Nathan Rourke and Riley Pickett or something like that. Yeah, same
idea.
Jakubec, yeah. Farhan and his dog. The possibilities are endless here. All right, back to a food one for me. It's been a couple of weeks. Last 2 on tap recordings. Rosencrown, Tawasin this week. Last week, BC Kitchen at the Park Casino. Tater tots offered us. I can't resist tater tots, Nikki. The Rosencrown, it was a huge serving. It had no chance. I think I gave Moj like 2 of them, and you can't beat tater tots as an option. I just love it.
100%, yeah. And I think for the record too, out of all the pubs that we travel to across the season, I think Rose and Crown is my number 1 for food. And even drinks too. We got these really cool martinis afterwards.
And a lot of these have great food, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
But yeah, Rose and Crown.
They gave us Tukes, take care of us.
Tukes, yeah.
I love Rose and Crown.
So if we have to go to a cold climate in the playoffs, we can represent Rose and
Crown.
Rose
and Crown Tukes. They got to expand out in Surrey though. I need to get a little closer to me, and I'd be there on a maybe bi-weekly basis. I don't want to be there at the bar too often, but
shout out to Shelly, takes care of us, big Lions fan. So
yeah, so that was great. But
all right, what are you punting?
This was a trendy one on social media, and when I saw this, I immediately thought I got to punt this because I don't know if you saw this, but the Oklahoma State football program. So
I think I did see this.
Head coach Mike Gundy announced that the Cowboys, so the Oklahoma State football team, are going to have QR codes on the back of their helmet. And I'm not punting the NIL, the name, image, and likeness that the college athletes are now able to make money off of their names while they're playing college football. But it just looks pretty silly. I question, outside of like still photos on social media, how anyone is going to be able to scan QR codes in live time. I just think the idea is there.
Yeah,
but
I guess I never thought of it to this extent. Like,
how are you going to,
who's going to get close to scan it? Yeah.
There were some funny memes where they're like putting like on like the Jumbotron where it was like $100 you go for it on 4th down, $50 you punt on 4th down or something like that. But it's a pretty silly idea. I don't think it's too feasible. And then the thing is, if you're looking at a still photo, why don't you just go to the players' GoFundMe or not GoFundMe? What do they call it in America? It's an app we don't have.
PayPal?
Not
No,
PayPal.
we have
there's one app that it's like a money transfer app that we don't have in Canada. Venmo.
Anyway.
Venmo. That's what I was tip my tongue. So you can just go to their Venmo and do it that way on your phone. So I think it's kind of silly. It looks stupid too. That's kind of my main.
Yeah, it doesn't. I guess the colors kind of blend in there with those listening to this podcast can go Google this easily. It's on the stripe of the helmet, so I guess it kind of blends in. But yeah, just still
how you gonna do that?
An odd look. Yeah, no, it's just the world we're in as well. All right, I'm seeing enough of Tom Brady. Like every time Tom Brady does something or says something or takes a picture, like everyone just shares it. Like now that it's great that he's broadcasting on Fox. Although I don't like how he's taken Greg Olson's spot, because I thought Greg Olson alongside Kevin Burkhardt, that was a great duo. But last week, he's talking to Jerry Jones in Dallas. We gotta share this. What are they talking about? Is he coming back? And then in Santa Clara, I get home after our game and I skim through PVR Niners Saints NFL preseason. I can't always do it, and I just wanted to see how the Niners did, and then later on, Tom Brady's talking to I forget who it even was on the Niners, and then people say, remember when the Niners should have signed him? And it's like, okay, just we get it. Like, I don't know.
Less Tom Brady, more Nate Brady, as a wise TJ Lee once said after a 41-40 victory at Calgary.
Nate Brady, yes. Better than Kid Canada as a nickname. I like Kid Canada. I like Kid Canada, but
it fits, yeah.
Yeah, anyway, NFL season just around the corner. And again, it's great that Brady's part of this, but at some point, it has to sink in for people, is what I'm saying. All right. Another one in the books, 4:00 Saturday. Moj and Julio on 980 CKNW pregame at 3. Harp and Tack, Lions Radio Punjabi, Shiri Punjab AM 600 pregame 3:30. First of a home-and-home series. Let's come back with a win and get some good momentum for Touchdown Pacific. All right.
Sounds like a plan to me. I'm already getting amped up for TDP. I know our whole staff is going all this tasks
taking over right now.
It's starting right now, so it's everything's in gear right now.
A lot of graphics need to be made for this.
I mean, I've been getting sent some images of all the stadium being built right now and all that.
I got sent a video of the press box. Looks pretty good.
But it's happening. Touchdown Pacific next week. A week from today, we'll be pretty much we'll be on our way.
We'll be on the plane. Yes.
We'll be literally in the. I think we'll be landed by now because it's a short flight. But besides the point, we'll be in Victoria next week, and I'm really excited for it.
And we will be back next week on First and Now.